has the SRIOV functionality on the GPU. But yeah, it's exciting. But if you look at the Alder Lake P chip, that one's actually pretty interesting because the base model server chip has 128 execution units for SRIOV use. And the top end, I think it's the Alder Lake P part, has, I think it's 96 EUs. So it's like a stone throw away from the server part, and it's got the virtualization. So it's like, yeah, right.
I'll go back and parse those threads and see if I don't track you as far as submitting another purchase order into Amazon.
Yeah. No, I'm sitting, I'm like hovering over the buy button. I'm just wanting to choose the right storage and RAM and stuff. And it's like, yeah, it'd probably be a ThinkPad, but I'm guessing there's a whole list of different laptops that have like the better Alder Lake part. So
yeah, one of us ought to airdrop into Penguin Computing or some such to kind of cue them in, because the folks are specializing in open hardware laptop solutions and whatnot that to chase after this and add it to the product portfolio and raise visibility of it.
Yeah,
That's
definitely.
Good sleuthing you guys did.
Yeah, yeah, they've it's exciting. It's exciting stuff. So we'll actually get into so the first thing actually I think we should do is cover some logistics stuff now that folks are kind of trickling into the call. So there's been some indication from folks that what we should do is maybe take this from 11 a.m. EST and move it to 1 p.m. EST, which is 3 hours later, mostly for the benefit of folks who are in California. That's probably going to suck for people that are in the UK. So we'll try it next month, and then we'll see how does that affect turnout, and then if it's positive, maybe then we do that going forward.
Yeah, well, we'll figure out the time. Maybe we'll put poll in the group chat in the Discord.
Yeah. So anyway, do you guys want to just sort of introduce yourselves now that we're all kind of here? So we've got Kiwi Zen, who I think is just listening. John, did you want to introduce yourself to start? John's still here.
Yeah, he's still there.
I think
sorry about that. Yeah, no John's talking about C8. Very interested in all the work this community is doing, and at the moment, just monitoring, listening, and learning.
Yep, sounds good. Paula Loca, did you want to give a brief little mention of yourself?
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, very good. I wrote a guide on GitLab on how to set up Proxmox with vGPU, and I'm also working on off for the past few months on vGPU support for Ampere and up.
Yep, perfect. I'm trying to see, Eugene, did you want to say hello, introduce yourself? I don't know if Eugene has a microphone.
I'm not too sure.
Sorry. I was muted. Yeah, I'm just from your Discord, guys. I just wanted to drop by and see what's going on here and what
sounds good.
Everyone.
Okay, thanks for coming. So Skylar, did you want to say hi? Give a little brief intro on yourself. What's the name? Skylar Scott?
I'm on the bus right now, so I'll keep it short, but I do a bit of design and interested in the project and getting involved and helping.
Yep. Oh, is this Geek Tea?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Geek Tea.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing well.
Good to hear. Good to hear.
Busy.
Grand, you're here. Grand's one of my absolute favorites. He's been here for every one of the calls, including the call when it was literally just me and you sitting alone in the room. Hey, Grand. Maybe he doesn't have a mic. I'm not sure.
Yeah, he is typing. Well, he types.
Hey. Yeah. Kenny says nerd. Hey, don't be mean, Kenny. Hey, Kenny. And Kenny, did you want to say hello? I don't think Kenny has a mic. Anyway, so yeah, I think that basically. Kenny, yeah. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hey, how you doing, man?
I'm all right. So
All right, good stuff.
I'm just a member of the Discord community around libvfio.
Yep, sounds good. Okay, so in terms of, I'll kind of just give like a brief summary on a couple of the topics that we should cover. So one, I think we should talk about, apparently there have been people who have been doing more testing with VirtIOFS, so stability improvements there. With the discussion with John, there's some ideas around perhaps using vGPUs for something RAID related for NVMe devices. Later, I think we should touch on, I think VGX 15 or version 5.25 of the drivers out. There's some new things there we can probably dive into. Some things done with Nouveau guests. That is kind of an interesting note, another subject. Later, I think we should touch on the Alder Lake P based devices, and then the Flex GPUs and just the sort of execution unit differences there, numerically, how much difference there is in terms of the amount of GPU. Then I think we should talk about supporting Intel laptops going forward, and then probably talking about some of our plans with Lime now that we have a clear support pathway on laptops. And then probably should talk about a teaser for some GPU Santa related things for Christmas.
Yes.
And then, we'll do our unrecorded stuff later, and then we'll wrap up the call. So should we just first touch on some of...
Hold on.
Yeah.
So Kenny, you mentioned, did you mean 525? And
Yeah,
yes, we
525.
did.
That's what we meant. I think that is VGX version 15. I haven't quite looked too detailed yet. We'll get into that in a bit on what we wanted to discuss there. But before we really dive into it, so it looks like there's been a lot of indication that VirtIOFS has maybe become a little bit more stable in Windows guest scenarios. I'm not entirely confident. I haven't really looked into it with a great amount of detail. There was a video that I think Unknown linked earlier that I haven't quite gotten into it to a huge extent, but in his testing, I think it's basically okay now. He said there was something to do with like a corruption issue when he dumped in like 32 terabytes of data, but otherwise it was fine overall. So I think that probably is like a strong enough signal that we ought to basically revisit this.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're planning to.
Yeah. I mean, it really ought not to be like a huge thing where we just spend a bunch of time like, okay, we're going to just do this and make a huge plan about it. I think we should just go off and do it, because frankly, to just figure out, okay, is the old issue still there? Yes or no? It should just be a couple, like maybe an hour or two of testing.
That's true, but we also want to release guest util.
Yeah.
This will allow you guys to experience some of the more closed source stuff that we have been working on, specifically being able to automatically set up certain aspects of the guest, using different communication methods.
Yeah.
We're working on standardizing in such a way that it works for both the normal code base, such as Windows and Linux, as well as other ones that...
It's okay.
Yeah. But yeah, we're planning on having it open
Kaizen,
source.
could you mute your mic? I can hear you. It's a little loud. Thanks very much.
Yeah. We're planning on having a good chunk of it open source. And if individuals wanted to have closed source proprietary portions of this, plug into this open source guest util, they are more than welcome to do that and add the communication methods that they want.
Yeah. So another thing that I think is kind of like maybe a bar that we've set slightly too high, at least for validating the feature or the Limes mediated emulation thing, is automatic guest setup. I think honestly, like the bigger problem, so there's been the two issues, which is like
the shared memory pool.
So something you should take a look at is in the Intel implementation, they're a little unique with their SRIOV implementation because the physical function of the device keeps working for acceleration on the host or in DOM0, even if you create SRIOV virtual functions. So it might work out that that is actually like the ideal device for your use case, because then you can have the actual platform continue to be accelerated for your primary monitor, and then you can send in the virtual functions to like your RAID, like DOM or whatever like that.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
We have to figure. Oh, actually, never mind. Intel actually does have preliminary support also for cubes, I think.
There's some discussion there.
Yeah, it's a Acorn hypervisor document.
Yeah.
I'll show you what I'm
I know
saying.
I know you're thinking. Yeah. There's yeah. Okay, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay, let's. I think that's their what is it called? Like their spin. We'll have to double check some things there.
Yeah, it is a spin, but I think what we can do is we can potentially, with very little effort on our part, enable it for.
It is some of the best documentation I've ever seen.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
We love our friends at Intel.
In fact, yeah, that's true. Okay, so we should probably jump to the next thing, which is that VGX or NVIDIA, their driver version 5.2.5 is released. They kind of paused releasing drivers sometime around 5.10 relating to virtualization, and then they decided they were going to dump a new one just like late last week.
So what I think happens with this is a look for so you have the 510 ports.
Yeah.
And I think that portion does support all the way up to like one version up and one version down into VGX stuff. So they only dumped, and thanks to Palo Loco, we have on the web now capability for VGX 15.
Yeah, so that's good.
Unfortunately, we have very limited resources from an engineering perspective.
Yeah.
So we are making the decision for the time being not to actually merge the merged driver code that is available on the internet unless someone else was to.
I mean, I think at the moment we have. Yeah, I mean the main thing is definitely the engineering time. But if somebody wants to do a PR, we'll merge it.
Yeah, exactly. We are focusing mostly on Intel for the time being. The main reason is we have amazing documentation from them compared to all the other vendors currently, and
the support on the devices.
Yeah,
and a roadmap really on the support. Actually, that's one of the best parts about the whole thing is that it is obviously the fact that you have like inexpensive laptops that support the functionality, but it's the fact that we have a very clear roadmap for support today, support tomorrow, support next year, support the year after that on all these devices going forward. And there's no sort of question about like, okay, the window is open for this device, and then we're not clear on the next one or the one after that. And yeah.
John, actually what you mentioned specifically, where we are covering in the next section.
What was his question?
He was mentioning about his capability to interact with AMD to act as a conduit.
Yeah. So I was actually, yeah, that makes sense.
So since we are planning to focus and switch more or less completely to...
Why don't we cover that in a little bit? Yeah. The one thing I was going to mention is I think there's like a new struct param with the 5.2.5, which there's a couple of them. Paulo Loca, you found those, right? Is he still
yeah, it's not really new, but they changed it. It's a different RM call that's used right now.
Literally any Intel laptop. The other like P1s are interesting because they just have a little bit more GPU than the other ones. But yeah, so that's an interesting note because those laptops, if you actually look at the amount of GPU they have in them, like you can get a ThinkPad or you can get, I think there's like Dell XPS. The HP has those parts. They have 96 execution units. This is like Intel's measure of like the cores or whatever. The actual cores inside of them, or the number of silicon transistors, is the EU is a measure that doesn't really provide. It's like XE cores or whatever, right? Whatever they call it. Mm-hmm. They're bigger. I think the tiles are larger than CUDA cores, so it's not really a comparable number. But the it's 96 EUs in the Alder Lake P part, and I think it's in the so that's SRIOV capable in the laptop. And then in the server part, the Flex 140, the base model of that is based on the DG2 128, which has 128 execution units. So the base, like the laptop part, is a stone throw away from the actual discrete GPU. Both are SRIOV capable. And that functionality, like the number of EUs we're going to get in laptops going forward, is only going to go up. So frankly, and this is going to be officially supported on every Intel laptop going forward. It doesn't matter which one you get. So honestly, this seems like the single best path for support, because every piece of software that we develop for this is just going to work going forward. And there's nothing like, we don't have to go back and reverse engineer. We don't have to go back and figure out how do we make this work. It's just, this just works. And honestly, in some ways, that really ought to be the way that we approach it for functionality like Lime or things like that, or even just libVFIO in general, but definitely Lime, because if we're going to spend the time to build that, it ought to work in the future, not just old hardware.
Exactly.
So that's kind of our observation there. So we're going to aim to try to do support in laptops for libVFIO, have automatic setup of the relevant drivers. So probably we're going to have to use the DKMS stuff for now, and probably the zero copy, their implementation of Looking Glass, hopefully soon. That should be in the install guide. That should be in the install scripts, I think, relatively soon. I think that covers that stuff.
Yes.
Did you want to touch on Lime at all?
Yeah. So what we're aiming to do is by end of Q1 next year is to properly support Lime with all these new features that have been out there. Hopefully a bit sooner than end of Q1, but main reason for this is we want to allocate the resources in a sustainable manner and not.
Yeah, we want to get obviously our commercial product GVM server out.
Of
but
course.
The other aspect of it is obviously supporting the open source, improving the open source.
So to answer John's question, Lime is mediated emulation. It's similar to Wine. The main difference is instead of actually emulating the workspace, what we do is we provide a capability of spawning up a new virtual VM. A VM.
Do you want me to explain?
Yeah, go for it.
So Lime is mediated emulation as a feature where basically we had some support for it around the time of, I think it was FOSDEM. There were some things, particularly around the stability of the guest driver or the guest file system sharing with the host, that were a little bit not there. It looks like there's been some substantial improvements, but the actual feature, what it accomplishes is you can take a program. So say, for example, it's a video game, or it's like a web browser, or it is like an Adobe program or whatever. And if you're in Linux, oftentimes those things don't work. People run them under compatibility layers like Wine. Obviously, the problems there are that those programs often don't run correctly, or they're not particularly performant, or if it's like a recent video game, not all the APIs are available under Proton or DXVK. So what we do is we basically take that program, we put it into a shared file system, we spawn up a Windows guest, and we execute the program under the Windows guest using a shared frame buffer between the host and guest. So the shared frame buffer is no compression, no copying. It's using something called Looking Glass. It's a KVM frame relay. In the case of Intel, they have their own version in the driver called Zero Copy, or Display Virtualization for Windows OS. That uses, I think it's UDMA buff, and I think it's like a ring buffer that allows you to get the frame buffer address space between the host and the guest without any copies. So this is blazing fast. This is so fast it feels like native graphics. So it's a completely different approach to doing compatibility for programs, and the main benefit is it's very fast. It's perfectly compatible with basically every game because it's real Windows. So it's a different take on the problem that uses the virtualization tech in a new way.
It's going to be a new introspection object. Previously, we only supported Looking Glass as an introspection object. This will be a secondary introspection object for our friends who decide to use Intel.
Yeah. If I'm not sure if I've ever shared it previously. I could actually, just for your benefit, do a quick little sharing. I think I have a video recording of it.
if I get the top level concepts right, we have the ability to run a Windows guest with native interaction with the vGPU and a shared frame buffer that is a fully accessible by, say, the window manager of a Linux host. They're sharing
Yeah.
the same frame buffer.
So I will share this so you can see it. Can you see my screen all right?
Yep.
So here is the video. So we have a program. You can't really see it because it's small text. I think it's a game called Rocket League in the file system on the host. And what I've done is I've said Lime run Rocket League. So it's actually just spawned up a virtual machine to execute that program in the guest. And what you're seeing here, the screen is Looking Glass. It's the KVM frame relay. So it copies the frame buffer from host to guest. So what you're actually seeing execute in the guest right now, this is actually a Windows virtual machine that's opened up in Linux and is directly executing the program using a virtualized GPU that's shared by the host and the guest. It has an unmodified guest driver in the guest operating system and an unmodified driver in the host as well.
Jam on.
So it's a completely different take on how to do compatibility. And like the main benefit of doing it this way is that it's way more compatible and it's way more performant compared to the compatibility layers like Wine.
Yeah. Emulation layers. So does this take a full install of Windows to? Yeah, I would imagine. So we're running an instance of real Windows under the context of KVM. Did you say?
Correct. We actually had an automatic guest installer. So the idea was that you could basically stick the ISO into this optional directory. You'd bring your license key, and then you do a single copy. Like you'd basically run one command, and it would automatically go off and run or do the whole setup for the guest. That feature.
It's
The video is still running. Hold on.
Also, Skylar, Lime is open source, and we aim to always have Lime as open source.
Yeah. The automatic guest setup thing is something that I think we're going to wait on a little bit more because the main thing there has been Packer, which is not great. The file system sharing is the main thing I think we want to improve to better support that feature. So where's my notes? Hold on. What was the question by Tizen?
Copy system.
Do you want me to elaborate on that?
Yeah, go for
Sorry,
it.
I just have a hard time seeing the comments. So Intel's approach, they use something called the indirect display driver, which it was kind of cool. I had the opportunity to meet the person who came up with something at Oculus called the direct display driver a while ago, which I think was the predecessor to the indirect display driver. That was really cool. I think he's now he works at a company called Juice. I think he's one of the founders of that. Very cool company. That's anyway. So those guys, the indirect display driver in the context of Windows is basically a virtual display that they attach to the Intel virtual GPU, the SRIOV GPU. So this is kind of like virtual displays in NVIDIA, but it has an open source driver implementation. And then they have a DV server, display virtualization server UMD, so user mode driver, and a DV server KMD or kernel mode driver. That, if I'm understanding correctly, makes use of something that's a part of their kernel driver on the host called, what is this? I915, what is this? The PF to VF copy or zero copy path. They also have a VF to VF via PF and PF to VF.
Yeah. It's basically an amazing system that we want to actually shows use cases of in the future, specifically in the case of use-specific plugins for GVM, where you can allocate a certain vGPU to only be used in a certain application.
Yeah. So they basically have built in like their own pathway to supporting Looking Glass without the requirement for the inter-VM shared memory device. Like the memory sharing mechanism is actually literally built into the i915 SRIOV driver. So
yes,
yeah, it's kind of sexy.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Yeah, I like it. Anyway, so I think that just leads us to, we want to do the support for the Intel laptops. The VirtuFS stability. And I think the only thing we should maybe touch on before we do the unrecorded stuff is the GPU Santa at Christmas.
Yes. So pay attention. Sometime around the week of the 21st to 23rd, we will release something that will present a roadmap for the next year on how we're going to be handling GPU vendors and integrating them into the GVM server system, which we will hope to be launching shortly, specifically with Intel. We do also have on this list a little bit of exploratory work on AMD in this month to see the feasibility of this new changes that are going to be happening in the GVM project.
Yeah, mediated device support for AMD GPU.
Exactly. Using stubs and a whole library plugins. This will allow.
Why don't we leave some of it for the document?
Of course.
Okay. All right, guys. That's. Did you guys want to ask anything in the recorded, or do you want to discuss anything in the recorded before we hop out? Okay, I guess we'll cut the recorded section. I'm going to go make sure that's done. I'll be right back.